I didn't think you'd disappear without a word after 3 years. That's what I told him when I finally confronted Jake, but all I got was silence, nothing. No apology, no explanation, just a cold, empty void on the other end of the line. I sat there, staring at my phone like it had betrayed me, the screen glowing softly in my dim apartment. I could almost hear the echo of every moment we shared, now reduced to silence. My name's Olivia Harper, 34, and I'm a marketing strategist at one of New York's fastest-growing agencies. I'm the person my team counts on to turn chaos into clarity, but at that moment, all I could feel was chaos inside me. Jake and I had been together since our college days. The kind of relationship people envy, 3 years of shared dreams, late-night talks, and promises that felt like anchors. Then, just like that, he vanished. No calls, no texts, no "I'm sorry." It was like I was erased from his life overnight. The day I found out he ghosted me, it wasn't just heartbreak, it felt like a betrayal from the universe. The worst part. His sister, Emily, someone I trusted, slipped it out in a casual conversation. I was visiting my mom's place when Emily called, and the moment she said, "Jake's been talking about moving for a new job," something inside me snapped. I asked, "Did he tell you anything about me?" Her pause was deafening. "He didn't say much, Olivia, you know how he is." I felt like the floor beneath me had crumbled. Jake, the man I believed would stand by me, was already rewriting his story without me. And to make it worse, no one thought to tell me directly. Instead, I heard about his plans through a whisper, a side conversation, like I was just an afterthought. That day, everything changed, not just my heart but my world. My job became my refuge, my fortress. But even there, the pain followed me. I was walking through the glass doors of my office when my phone buzzed again. Another text from a recruiter about a position Jake had applied for. A cold shiver ran down my spine. That's when I realized he was trying to build a new life, a new chapter, and I was nowhere in it. But here's the truth no one sees. When someone ghosts you after years, it's not just about them disappearing. It's about the silence they leave behind, the questions that eat away at you. Why? How could he just walk away? Did I do something wrong? And the hardest, what do you do when the person you trusted most decides you don't matter anymore? I couldn't sit back and accept it. That's not me. I'm not the woman who fades quietly into the background. My strength isn't just in my work but in my refusal to be invisible. So I made a decision that day, not out of spite but out of self-respect. If Jake wanted to vanish, I'd make sure the next chapter in his life had my voice, loud and clear. The irony, Jake thought he could erase me. Instead, I was about to rewrite the rules. But how do you make someone notice you again when they've chosen to forget you? How do you turn the tables on someone who believes they've won by walking away? That's the question I was determined to answer. And that's when the plan started forming, quiet, deliberate, and just ruthless enough to make him regret ever ghosting me. But first, I had to gather my thoughts, my strength, and the tools to make sure his next employer called me, because if he wanted a fresh start, he'd need my reference. The question I kept asking myself as I sat in my apartment that night wasn't just about Jake disappearing. It was about who I was going to become after this, and what I was willing to do to make sure no one ever treated me like a ghost again. So, what happens when the ghost becomes the storm? It was about a week after I first heard from Emily when I finally got the chance to meet up with my best friend, Claire. Claire has always been the one who could cut through my chaos and see the truth without sugarcoating it. We met at our usual spot, a little cafe on 5th Avenue where the barista knows my order before I even walk in. "You look like you haven't slept," Claire said, sliding the coffee across the table. "What's really going on?" I hesitated but then spilled the story. The ghosting, the silence, Emily's slip about Jake's new job, everything. Claire listened, nodding, her eyes sharp but sympathetic. "That guy's a coward, Liv," she said, voice low but fierce. "Ghosting after 3 years, that's not just weak, it's cruel. And I bet there's more you don't know." "Like what?" I asked, trying to keep calm. Claire leaned in. "I heard from Tom, he's in Jake's circle, that Jake's been bragging, not just about the new job but about how easy it was to walk away from you. Like you're some kind of mistake he left behind." That hit me harder than I expected. But there was something about Claire's tone that made me feel less alone, like a fire was starting inside me. "You know," she continued, "Jake's always had that thing, he calls it the disappearing act. He's proud of it, like it's some badge of honor." I laughed bitterly. The disappearing act, that figures, always thought he was a drama queen. Claire smiled. "Yeah, but here's the thing, people like that think they're untouchable. They think no one calls them out because they disappear before anyone can. Not anymore, I said, feeling the first real spark of something other than pain. He won't get away with it. A few days later, I ran into my younger brother, Mark, at the gym. Mark's the kind of guy who's honest to a fault and no nonsense. I needed that perspective. So, you're saying he just vanished? No calls, no nothing. Mark shook his head, clearly pissed on my behalf. That's not just disrespectful, it's pathetic. I know, I said, and now he's using his new job to erase me from his life. Mark frowned. You ever thought about hitting him where it hurts, like the job? That idea surprised me. What do you mean? If he's trying to start over there, you could make sure they know exactly who he really is. And maybe it's not the guy they want. I stared at him. That's kind of brilliant. But Mark also warned me, just be smart about it, Liv, don't stoop to his level. That conversation stayed with me as I kept thinking about Jake. He wasn't just my ex who ghosted me. He was the man who lied, manipulated, and insulted me over time without me seeing the full picture. Remember that one time when he promised to support me during my biggest campaign launch and then bailated last minute because his friends wanted to party? Or when he mocked my work passion as overly ambitious in front of our friends? I had let that slide, believing things would change. Then there was the time he called me too sensitive for asking if he was being honest about his whereabouts. That phrase haunted me because it was his way of twisting the blame onto me, making me question my instincts. Jake had a pattern, a habit of disappearing when things got tough, a smirk when he thought he had the upper hand, and that damn leather bracelet he always wore, like a symbol of how much control he believed he had over the people around him. But the truth was, he didn't have control over me anymore. That realization made me stronger. I began quietly collecting the pieces, the messages I still had, emails where he contradicted himself, conversations with people who knew the real Jake. Emily, despite her slip, had no idea how tangled her brother's lies were, and I wasn't about to let her become collateral damage. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became. Jake's whole new life was built on convenient half-truths and polished lies. I wasn't going to stand for that. Not for me, not for the future I'm building. Later that week, I sat with Claire again, sharing everything I'd found. This isn't just about revenge, I told her. It's about making sure no one else gets blindsided. Claire nodded, eyes gleaming. You're going to make sure his next employer calls you for a reference. That's brilliant. And if they do, I said with a small, sharp smile, they'll hear the truth. Good, because Jake needs a reality check. As I left the cafe that evening, a sense of purpose wrapped around me like armor. Jake might have thought he walked away clean, but I was about to prove him wrong. The fire was lit, and there was no putting it out. The question now wasn't if I'd get my revenge, but when, and how far I was willing to take it. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind replayed every word Claire and Mark had said. I kept turning over that idea, using his new job against him. The thought sparked something I hadn't felt since this nightmare began. Control. Not the kind Jake thought he had, but real control. The kind that comes from being smarter, faster, and a step ahead. A small flashback came to me, unbidden but sharp, months before he disappeared. We were at a dinner party with friends, and Jake had the usual charm, that grin of his that made everyone believe he was harmless. But I remembered how I'd caught him texting someone during the meal, his eyes darting nervously. When I asked who it was later, he brushed me off with a smirk, just work stuff. I knew then something wasn't right, but I had convinced myself to trust him. Now I saw it clearly. Jake's lies didn't start when he ghosted me, they were always there beneath the surface. I sat up, grabbing my laptop. It was time to start gathering proof. I couldn't just confront him with accusations. I needed undeniable facts, emails, texts, anything that showed who he really was. I opened my Messages app and started combing through old conversations, noting inconsistencies, contradictions, and moments he tried to cover his tracks. The next morning, I met with Rachel, my coworker and the agency's tech whiz. Rachel was the kind of friend who could decrypt a password or find a hidden file with the speed of a detective. We grabbed coffee at the office kitchen. So what's the mission? Rachel asked, raising an eyebrow. I smiled despite the knot in my stomach. I need to do some digging. Find out what Jake's really been up to, especially with this new job he's so proud of. Rachel nodded slowly. Sounds like a ghost story with a twist. Count me in. We spent the next few days quietly piecing together his digital footprint. Rachel helped me recover some deleted messages from cloud backups and even managed to get an email chain from a recruiter that mentioned Jake's spotty work history. It wasn't much, but it was enough to start connecting dots. Meanwhile, I kept up appearances at work. No one would suspect that while I was leading campaigns and managing clients, I was plotting a quiet but calculated revenge. I had a reputation to protect, and losing myself in bitterness wasn't an option. One afternoon, my phone buzzed with a text from Emily. "Hey Olivia, I'm sorry about everything. I didn't mean to hurt you. Can we talk?" Her words caught me off guard. Despite everything, Emily had always been someone I cared about. I replied cautiously, "We can talk when." She suggested a small park near her apartment. Sitting on a bench beneath the budding spring trees, I saw her hesitation, the guilt in her eyes. "Olivia, I didn't know Jake was like this. He's told me so many versions of what happened between you two. I wanted to believe he was the good guy." I looked at her, the sister of the man who'd broken my heart and tried to erase me. "Emily, people like Jake don't change just because they want to. He's been lying to you, to everyone. But it's not your fault." She sighed. "I want to help you. I want him to answer for this." That moment was a turning point. With Emily's subtle support, I realized I wasn't alone in this. The more people who saw Jake for what he was, the harder it would be for him to escape the consequences. Back at work, my mind was racing. The plan was taking shape. More than just collecting evidence, I had to find a way to make sure Jake's next employer would have no choice but to call me for a reference. After watching this video, may your heart feel at ease and revenge be fun without exhaustion. Don't forget to like and subscribe so we can keep our spirits bright together. That meant positioning myself as indispensable in my industry. I started reconnecting with old contacts, leveraging every conversation to build my credibility. One night, after a networking event, I found myself talking to Martin, a hiring manager at the company Jake had applied to. He was impressed by my insights on market trends and asked for my card. "Olivia, if you ever want to collaborate or share insights, I'd be happy to hear from you," Martin said with a warm smile. That was my opening. I smiled back, calm and collected. "I look forward to it." In the quiet moments, I thought about Jake's arrogance, how he believed he could ghost me and start over without consequences. He didn't realize the storm he had unleashed. I remembered Claire's words from weeks ago. "People like Jake think they're untouchable. Time to prove them wrong." The truth was, revenge wasn't just about making him pay. It was about reclaiming my story, my strength, and showing myself I was worth fighting for. So I kept moving forward quietly, deliberately, sharpening every detail of my plan. But the question that kept me awake at night was this: would my carefully built strategy be enough to pull him back into my world, where the truth would catch up with him? Or was Jake still one step ahead, ready to disappear again? I still remember the moment it all started to come together, the day I got the call that would change everything. It was a Monday morning, and I was sitting at my desk, eyes glued to my laptop screen when my phone buzzed. Caller ID showed Martin's name, the hiring manager from the company Jake had applied to. "Olivia Harper?" Martin's voice was crisp, professional. "Yes, this is Olivia," I answered, trying to keep my tone neutral. "I wanted to ask you about Jake Reynolds," Martin said. "He listed you as a reference." A slow, satisfied smile crept across my face. I hadn't told Jake I'd do this. That was the whole point. He thought he could rewrite his story without me, but here I was, about to make sure his truth was told. "What would you like to know?" I asked, calm as a still lake on a windless day. Martin hesitated a moment. "Just general feedback, work ethic, teamwork, reliability." I leaned back in my chair, allowing the silence to stretch before answering. "I can tell you this. Jake is someone who excels at disappearing when things get difficult. His commitment is as reliable as a morning fog, here 1 minute, gone the next." There was a brief pause on the other end, and I heard Martin chuckle quietly. "That's colorful." "It's the truth," I said, voice steady. "I'm sure you'll find that Jake's track record is full of starts but few finishes. I'd recommend you ask for more than just references before making a decision." Martin thanked me and ended the call. I sat there for a moment, feeling a mix of triumph and relief. Revenge wasn't about yelling or confrontation, it was about facts, strategy, and timing. And in that moment, I was winning. The next few days, I watched Jake's confident facade start to crack. I heard from mutual acquaintances that the company was asking tough questions about his history, questions he couldn't answer without tripping over his own lies. One afternoon, as I was leaving work, I bumped into Claire. She grinned as I told her about the call. "Look at you," she said, shaking her head in admiration, "taking him down with class." "It's not just about taking him down," I replied. "It's about showing him I'm not someone you ghost and forget. I'm the one they call when they want the truth." Claire laughed, then looked serious. You're always 2 steps ahead, Olivia. But watch out, he's not going down without trying to fight back. And fight back he did. A few days later, my phone buzzed with a message from Jake. I stared at it in disbelief. Olivia, can we talk? I want to explain. I read the message twice, then deleted it without a reply. That was when the real game began. Jake tried everything, the guilt trips, the fake apologies, even the classic "I've changed" line. But I wasn't interested. My silence was my strongest weapon. Instead, I focused on the next phase of my plan, making sure his current colleagues knew the truth. I reached out to a few contacts who had worked with him before and discreetly shared what I had learned. The word spread quietly but firmly. One day, I got a call from Lisa, a former coworker of Jake's. Olivia, I don't know how you found out all this, but it's exactly what we suspected. He's been cutting corners, lying about his contributions. That's what I'm counting on, I said. Honestly, you're braver than me, Lisa added. I'd be too scared to confront someone like him. I smiled to myself. Sometimes bravery is just being smart. I realized that the more people who saw Jake for who he was, the harder it would be for him to hide. My revenge wasn't about ruining him, it was about unmasking the truth. And Jake. He was fumbling in the dark, realizing too late that the ghost he left behind was now a storm. One night, I caught myself laughing out loud when a mutual friend told me about Jake's reaction to my call with Martin. He looked like he saw a ghost, my friend said with a smirk. I couldn't help but add, well, I am the ghost and I've come back to haunt him. That little victory felt sweeter than I expected. Not because I wanted to hurt Jake, but because I'd taken control. I'd turned betrayal into power. Yet, even with all this progress, I knew the hardest part was still ahead. I had to prepare for the moment when Jake tried to fight back in ways I hadn't yet imagined. The game was far from over. But for now, I was the one holding the cards, and I intended to play them perfectly. The question hanging in the air was clear. How far was Jake willing to go to save the life he thought he could rebuild without me? And how far was I willing to go to make sure he never forgot the woman he tried to erase? The next few weeks unfolded like a slow-burning storm. Jake's carefully constructed new life was unraveling, thread by thread, and I was watching every moment with a mix of satisfaction and steely resolve. But this wasn't just personal anymore, it was turning legal and the stakes had never been higher. One afternoon, my phone buzzed with an unexpected message from Rachel. Got something. Need you to see this ASAP. My heart quickened as I opened the encrypted file she'd sent. It was an internal memo from Jake's new company, flagged by an anonymous whistleblower, detailing discrepancies in Jake's reported hours and project contributions. The evidence was damning: documents, time logs, and even emails where Jake promised deliverables he never produced. This is it, I whispered to myself, the pieces clicking into place. I called Claire, who was already my unofficial counsel through all of this. Claire, I have solid proof now, this can't be ignored. Claire's voice was sharp but supportive. Good, this is the moment to push. You're not just fighting for yourself anymore, you're protecting everyone who's been affected by him. Together, we started reaching out to the company's legal department, sending over the files with a clear message. Jake's misconduct wasn't just workplace negligence, it was fraud. A few days later, I found myself in a stark, cold conference room, sitting across from the company's legal team. The lead lawyer, a woman named Karen, was both intimidating and focused. Miss Harper, your evidence is compelling, Karen said, flipping through the documents. This isn't just hearsay. It's a pattern of deception that the company can't ignore. I nodded, feeling a surge of quiet triumph. I'm glad you see it. Jake's disappearance was just the start. This is who he really is. Karen looked up, eyes sharp. We'll begin an internal investigation immediately. Your testimony will be crucial. Meanwhile, news of the investigation began to leak. I heard whispers from Jake's former colleagues, the furtive glances, the hushed conversations. It wasn't long before Jake himself knew the walls were closing in. One afternoon, Mark called me, voice tense. He's trying to reach you, says it's urgent. I stared at my phone, heart pounding. Let him try. I wasn't the same person who'd begged for answers. Jake's call came through, and I answered with a calm I didn't fully feel. Olivia, his voice was desperate, this isn't how I wanted things to go. You don't understand. Oh, I understand perfectly, I replied evenly. You thought you could ghost me, ghost your responsibilities, and walk away clean, but life isn't a disappearing act, Jake. He sighed heavily. Look, can we meet? Just to talk. I hesitated but agreed to meet at a neutral cafe. I needed to see him, to confront the man who had caused so much damage, and to hear what he had to say, if only for closure. When we met, Jake looked tired, his usual cocky grin replaced by something more vulnerable. I noticed the leather bracelet was gone. "You ruined everything," I said bluntly. "Not just for me, but for yourself." Jake ran a hand through his hair. "I made mistakes, okay, but this is bigger than both of us now." I leaned forward. "You've lost your job. The company's investigation will probably end with legal action. You can't spin this." His eyes darted away. "I'm scared, Olivia. This is the first time I'm facing real consequences." That moment was jarring. The arrogant Jake was gone, replaced by a man drowning in regret and fear. But my response was clear. "Good, maybe now you'll learn the cost of betrayal." The legal team's investigation culminated in an official hearing. I was called to testify alongside witnesses and former colleagues. The room was tense, filled with sharp eyes and heavier truths. During the hearing, I spoke with clarity and conviction. Jake's actions weren't accidental, I said. They were deliberate attempts to deceive, manipulate, and abandon responsibility. I hope this serves as a warning, not just to him, but to anyone who thinks they can walk away from the truth. The opposing counsel tried to discredit me, but I stood firm, backed by irrefutable evidence. Outside the courtroom, reporters gathered, sensing a story that blended personal betrayal with corporate fraud. The headlines were brutal: rising star falls, from ghosting to legal trouble. Jake's world was collapsing faster than anyone expected. The man who once vanished without a word was now the center of public scandal. One night, I got a call from Emily. Her voice was soft but firm. "Olivia, thank you for standing up, for showing me the truth. I'm here if you need anything." I smiled, feeling a bittersweet warmth. "Thank you, Emily. This isn't over yet, but it's a start." As I hung up, I realized how far I'd come, from the woman left in silence to the one who spoke up with power. But the question that lingered wasn't about victory, it was about what came next. Could Jake rebuild his life after all this, or was this truly the end of his road? And what about me? After all the battles, all the scars, who was I now? Jake's downfall was as relentless as it was complete. What began as whispers became a roar: the loss of his job, the public exposure, and the swift collapse of everything he'd built. I watched it unfold from a quiet distance, knowing the price he was paying, and feeling a fierce satisfaction that justice was finally catching up with him. First came the material collapse. The company terminated him immediately after the investigation concluded. No severance, no second chances. His bank accounts were frozen, assets seized to cover the growing list of debts and legal fees piling up like dark shadows around him. Friends who once flocked to his side vanished as quickly as he had disappeared from my life. His reputation, once carefully curated, was shattered beyond repair. Social media lit up with stories of his lies and betrayals. The press ran stories with headlines like "From Rising Star to Fallen Ghost." Even his own family distanced themselves, embarrassed and disillusioned. I remember the day Emily called me, her voice breaking. "He's isolated, Olivia. Completely alone. It's like the world turned its back on him." That was the mental collapse, the hardest and most unforgiving. Jake, who once wore arrogance like armor, now spent his days in regret and self-deception. He told himself it wasn't real, that he was the victim. But the truth was unmistakable. The man who ghosted me was ghosting his own life. I often thought about the contrast between us, how far we'd both come from those early days when I believed in his promises and he thought he could control everything. Now I was rebuilding. With every campaign I led, every client I secured, I was proving to myself that strength comes from resilience, not manipulation. I was no longer the woman waiting for explanations. I was the woman shaping her own future. Sometimes, late at night, I would catch myself smiling when a message came through from someone who admired how I handled the situation. Not just for the revenge, but for the grace with which I reclaimed my life. One afternoon, I found myself at a small gallery opening, celebrating the launch of a project I'd led for months. As I looked around at the vibrant crowd, I realized how much I'd grown. The pain of betrayal had not broken me, it had forged me. But the most lasting moment came in a quiet conversation with Claire. "You did more than just get revenge," she said softly. "You took your power back." I nodded, feeling a deep peace I hadn't known in years. I guess sometimes the best revenge is living well. And as for Jake, I didn't wish him harm, but I hoped he finally understood what he lost, the chance to be part of someone who never stopped fighting for herself. The last time I heard, He was trying to piece his life back together in silence. Maybe someday he'd face what really happened. But for now, I was done being haunted. Months had passed since Jake's collapse, and life had begun to feel steady again, a rhythm I hadn't thought possible when I was drowning in silence and betrayal. But healing isn't a straight line. It's jagged, unpredictable, and full of moments that remind you of who you've become. One afternoon, I received an unexpected email from Martin, the hiring manager who'd first called me about Jake. "Olivia, we'd like to invite you to speak at our upcoming leadership seminar. Your story and professional insight have made a real impact here. We believe your experience can inspire others." I paused rereading the message. It wasn't just a professional nod. It was recognition of the journey I'd taken from a woman wronged to a woman in control. I accepted. On the day of the seminar, standing in front of a room filled with eager faces, I shared my story, not the one about revenge, but about resilience, integrity, and the power of owning your narrative. I learned that silence doesn't heal wounds, I told them. Speaking up does, taking control does, and sometimes the person you have to fight hardest for is yourself. After the seminar, several people approached me with gratitude, telling me how my story resonated with their own struggles. That night, as I walked home under the city lights, I felt a quiet strength settle inside me. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. A few weeks later, Claire and I launched a new mentorship program at my agency, aimed at helping women navigate workplace challenges and personal setbacks. It was my way of turning pain into purpose. One of the first participants was Emily. Watching her grow, learning to stand up to her own family drama, reminded me how far we'd come and how important it was to build each other up. Sometimes I catch myself looking at the leather bracelet Jake used to wear, now tucked away in a drawer, a relic of a past I'm no longer tied to. It's strange how an object can hold so much meaning. Betrayal, strength, and ultimately freedom. In a way, that bracelet became a symbol, not of the man who tried to erase me, but of the woman who refused to disappear. Because no matter what shadows someone casts over your life, you can always choose to step into the light. So here I am, stronger, wiser, and ready for whatever comes next. The future isn't just a blank page. It's a story I'm writing on my own terms. And as for Jake, well, his chapter ended the day he ghosted me. Mine, that story is just beginning.